Okay, this is it. Tuesday, August 18th, Organic News here on WOEIH Radio. And we're going to have the 2 full hours with Mark Passio because there's so much to talk about, and 1 hour from the last time is definitely not enough. So thank you for joining us again, Mark Passio from whatonearthishappening.com.
Catherine, it's always a pleasure to be here on Organic News. Thanks so much for inviting me back.
Okay, so the last time, I'm just going to kind of give this quick rundown of the topics that we went over so that we can, possibly elaborate on them, but not, necessarily like be repeating ourselves. But we have to make time because it is, 9/11 is coming up in like about a month, just shy of a month. So I wanted to leave, time to talk about that. We have 2 hours, and there's so many topics that you talk about, which boggles my mind sometimes. But we talked about eros relationships. Like as we were just talking about before the show started, about how everything seems to come down to the family system. Like, I try not to always like go back to the family system, but that's where it's, things seem to just end up. And then, we want to a lot of people want to talk about the system and point the fingers out there, which I, do believe has a lot of merit. But I've always, because it's just the way that I learned it, was focusing on what was and who was around me.
Right.
Because things like learning about how the Federal Reserve works and where money comes from and things like that, and the Wall Street crash and Occupy and all that stuff, the bankers, Bank of America, all of this stuff I learned much later. But how I initially learned and taught myself everything was from what I was experiencing personally and who was in my immediate surroundings, which was just like the more scaled down version. Like I couldn't understand why it took something like Wall Street crash, to get people out in the streets.
Right.
Because I was like, what took you so long? I mean, so, I knew something was completely screwed up for decades.
Sure.
So you, the last time I spoke to you, you said that you're going to be focusing on what actual Satanism is, the ones that are in fact running the world.
Yeah, so many people still, out there in the general population have a completely erroneous nature of what the satanic mindset, the satanic religion is. Many people in our everyday lives are Satanists and do not know that they are Satanists. And I think the problem comes with the word, the term Satanist. If people could get in their minds that the organized hierarchical network of the religion of Satanism is not one group, okay? It's a worldwide, hierarchically organized, interlocked, interconnected network of people who generally share the same ideology. And they will work together to advance common goals that they all have. Sometimes they'll even fight amongst each other for the spoils of war, if you will. But in general, they are working together because they are all in the know in certain information. That's information regarding not only how the human psyche works and how our inner drives and motivations work, so that they have a very, very deep knowledge of psychology, of human psychology, and the general public in general does not have any knowledge of human psychology, and therefore they can be easily manipulated and exploited by this cabal of individuals. And they have knowledge about how the laws of nature work, and they have occulted those general laws of nature, what I term, what I group under the umbrella term natural law, especially when it comes to the spiritual laws of reality. They have deep knowledge about how that system of laws work, and they also try as much as possible to keep that knowledge back from humanity so they could easily manipulate us. Now, this organized, interlocked network of institutions and orders, fraternal orders, that constitute this worldwide religion that I will refer to as Satanism, is not the general worship of the Christian idea of a devil, okay, or of a dark god, a dark evil god or deity. I am not claiming that that belief never enters into the picture in this hierarchical belief system. Okay, some of them do believe in entities and demons, if you will, principalities, and we can get into all of that. I generally focus more on the ideological aspect of it as it applies to a worldview, how one lives and operates in the world. And when you understand what this ideology that I call Satanism, okay, and that many other people understand as real Satanism, when you understand the ideology that it contains, it comprises, you will realize that the vast majority of the people of our culture, and indeed throughout the world, are actually living under a satanic worldview. They actually hold satanic beliefs, but do not understand them as such, or do not call those beliefs satanic, or they don't understand them to be a part of the satanic ideology, the religion of Satanism. So that's one of the things that I want to try to make as clear as possible. And I really I'm going to do a presentation, a full-blown presentation on this very dynamic to clearly explain what this worldwide hierarchical religion is all about. But the main tenets of it are putting the self above everything else. So service to self comes before anything else, including any notion of morality. It comes before any kind of service to others. It comes before service to truth, okay? It is all about my needs, me ideology first and foremost, and it doesn't matter who you have to step on to have your base needs and creature comforts satisfied. Your whims, your likes, okay, they need to be served first and foremost. And if anybody else's rights or freedoms are being, put in harm's way or jeopardized as a result of your creature comforts being met, then so be it. It does not matter. The self, lowercase s, self, comes first. And everything else be damned, pretty much. And then everything flows from that. So Satanism could more likely, could better be described as egoism or egotism run completely out of control. It is the religion of the ego. It is the worship of the ego. It is the self being put up on the pedestal and worshipped as the God, as the most important thing in creation. This also comes from an atheistic, a left-brain, scientismic, and atheistic worldview that there is no higher power in creation than humanity. Many Satanists are atheists. However, not all of them are. Some of them do accept that there is a higher power in the universe than man, regardless of what they look at that as. And many of them simply want to be gods, lowercase g, here on earth. They want to rule in hell, so to speak, rather than serve in heaven, rather than actually live according to the actual moral laws that are in place in creation and put there by the actual creator of the universe. So regardless of whether they are deistic or atheistic, Satanists have this notion that the self is the God here on earth, and they are doing whatever they can to expand the power of the lowercase s self at the expense of anybody else. That's the number one tenet. I come first. The second main tenet, which is absolute, first of all, just by that first tenet, by the way, anybody who's just remotely paying attention to what people are like in modern society should be able to immediately tell most people are in that satanic mindset. If you don't understand that egoism and selfishness is what's basically the worldview of the day, I don't know what world you're living on. I don't know what planet you're on, okay? Because this is what I see all around me, and this is what most people who I think are being honest with themselves see all around them. You know, it's everybody trying to grab as much as possible for themselves, and they don't really think about how their behaviors affect others, or they don't care about what the system, how it's immoral or what it's doing to people's lives or their spirits or their souls. You know, it's just acquire as much as I can to get by and survive. Okay, so this self-serving ideology comes first and foremost, and that's what our culture is based upon. The notion that, you know, it's all about getting what I need and satisfying my base needs, my creature comforts, and my pleasure, okay? A hedonistic worldview and a totally selfish, a socially Darwinistic worldview. And we'll get to, that's like the third tenet. But the second tenet of modern organized Satanism is moral relativism. This is another thing that's rampant in society. This is the idea that there's no objective, actual, in nature difference between right behavior and wrong behavior, that it's all just relative, and, you know, it's all based on the circumstances or the situation. Okay, so many people do not accept that there is an objective law of morality in existence in the universe that actually governs human behavior. As a matter of fact, we did a poll. I held a seminar in Philadelphia a couple of years back on natural law, which is essentially moral law, and, you know, is about the teachings between what behaviors are actually rights of human beings and what behaviors are not rights because they cause harm to other people and therefore they are wrongdoings or transgressions against natural law. I had a whole seminar that, you know, broke natural law down in extreme depth and went into a lot of traditions that have taught the morality of natural law over the centuries to human beings. You know, I hosted this here in Philadelphia a few years ago, and as part of that, I assigned homework assignment to the, you know, quote-unquote students, the attendees of the seminar. And part of the homework was that they had to engage people in their everyday lives or on the street, wherever they chose, and ask them if they believed that there was such a thing as objective morality, meaning that is there an actual in nature difference between right and wrong behavior that is objective and outside of human perception, meaning that it is independent of human beings' perception of it, and human beings did not come up with that system or code of morality, that right and wrong exist independently of human beings and they exist objectively as objective standards in nature, in the universe. And when that question was posed to over 100 people, the results came back that over 2/3 of human beings do not accept or believe that there is an objective standard of right and wrong behavior present in the world, that these things are just constructs of the human mind, and we get to make up what right and wrong are based upon our likes, our preferences, our whims, or, you know, our legislation at any given time in any given geographic region. So they think, you know, morality can be created by humankind and decided upon based on, you know, what we want to be true at any given time or place. Now, when you have a society that is living in moral relativism, that is Satanism. I don't care what other term you want to use if you're not comfortable with the term Satanism. See, why I call it Satanism is because I understand that this is a codified religion. I was, in my youth, you know, in the past, I was an actual ordained priest within this religion. I actually worked with dark occultists who were involved in Satanism in an organization called the Church of Satan, and I had affiliations with many other occult satanic organizations in the area of the country where I live in Philadelphia. And as a priest within the religion of Satanism, I'm not asking anyone whether they want to accept or believe that this is what Satanism is. I could care less what anybody thinks or believes. I'm telling you definitively, this is the religion and these are its tenets. I don't care whether you like the name Satanism or not. I don't care whether you think that these people have influence in society or not. They do. They're running things. They are at the heads of all the institutions that we take, for granted and think of as, just the way things are here on Earth, including military, banking, education, media, medicine, you name entertainment, you name the social institution on Earth. And at the highest levels of that, there are people in positions of power that basically influence and direct those social institutions that are Satanists, that think this way and are actually involved in a direct level in this worldwide hierarchical network of dark occultism. And that's not a belief system. I'm telling you, as a former priest in that religion, this is their tenets, okay? And this is going on. So people can decide whether they want to accept that or not, but that's not going to change the fact that that's what's going on. I know this definitively to be true. So the problem is that people hear the word and they have this Hollywoodized notion of what Satanism actually is based upon what they've read in books or seen in movies. And, they think it's all just a bunch of teenagers wearing black robes and, sacrificing animals in the forest someplace and, chanting, incantations. Okay, it's so much more organized than that. It's so much actually darker than that, because these are people involved in the think tanks that essentially have come up with all the mind control techniques that have gone to work on people's minds over the centuries to socially engineer our consciousness. These are people who are running the military-industrial complex. These are people who are running the medical and pharmaceutical establishments and keeping cures for different diseases hidden from the public. These are people who are involved in the technology sector, who are keeping technologies that are clean and based on free energy away from people. They're at the heads of all those institutions on Earth. And these people have this basic ideology. We come first. We want to be the rulers here. We want to be the gods here. Yeah. Our creature comforts are to be served above all else, and that's what's good, and therefore that's what's right. It's all morally relativistic. There's no objective standard of right and wrong. So basically, if it's good for us, we can do it, regardless of who it harms. If it's bad for us, that's what we see as bad or evil or what needs to be suppressed. And this is how most of society thinks. It's not just the upper echelon or the elite. And that's the whole dangerous thing, Catherine, is that most people are living their lives according to this ideology. And they don't even understand that what they have subscribed to at a lower level as the slaves of this system of immorality and corporatism and communism, etc., that they are actually subscribing to the ideology of Satanism. They are low-level Satanists themselves when you think this way. And people just have a problem with the term, and many Christians will refuse to accept that this is what Satanism actually is in the world. They will insist it is about the worship of an evil deity that stands against God. Well, you know what? It's the worship of an evil form of consciousness that stands against all of creation. Okay? All of morality it stands against. All of goodness it stands against. It stands against all freedom. It stands against all true order. This is what Satanism actually is, and most people are living it in their day-to-day lives. The last two tenets, just to wrap up the main ideology, which, this is where the elite goes next with it, okay, is social Darwinism, which says because we're better than everybody else and we're the gods of society, we should rule the roost and we should rule over a hierarchical network of slaves, okay? It's the survival of the most ruthless. Is basically you're taking Darwin's theories as applied to the animal kingdom and you're applying them in the human social world. And saying, those who, their so-called genetics got them to this place of ruling, have this, divinely appointed right to rule somehow, or it's nature's divine right handed down to them to say, since you're already in this position of power, that should be maintained because you're actually at the highest level of the pecking order in society. And, that's right and that's good and that's the quote unquote natural order. How many people believe that there's a natural order of psychopathy in humanity, that the most vicious should actually just get to rule over other people in society? They're the alphas of a society. You hear this constantly all the time from people because they believe in this nonsensical notion of Darwinian evolution, which has nothing to do with how real evolutionary progress in consciousness works. And, you follow this line of reasoning, of this poisoned worldview, this ideology to its final step, you could say, and you arrive at the concept called eugenics. Eugenics is the ideology that is a certain class of people who, because they do rule society, have the right to, quote unquote, the right to decide who gets to breed and who does not get to breed. Or in other words, to decide who lives and who dies, who propagates their genetics down to the next generation and who does not. And part of my work has been to explain to people that these people are not just waging a eugenics war against the population. They most certainly are, and they're doing that through radionics. They're doing it through poison food, poison water, poison toxic so-called medication, drugs, pharmaceuticals. They're doing it epigenetically, okay? It's what I call epigenetic eugenics, and I've shortened that term. I call it epi-eugenics. The prefix epi in the Greek language means to go beyond, okay? To take something and to ratchet it up to a whole new level, to go beyond to a new territory. And epi-eugenics is what I call taking eugenics into the realm of that you're not actually doing it physically, like forcibly sterilizing people or forcibly, just killing people who you don't want to breed. You're actually waging a mind control program upon them to get them to cull their own population, to get them to breed in ways that you want them to breed, so certain qualities are bred down to the next generation. And we're seeing this through the whole war between the genders. Is something that I've talked about on my podcast, on my former radio show quite extensively, and went into many podcasts on this. This is about, the neo-feminism ideology, the neo-feminism agenda that comes out of dark occultism. And this is about waging a sustained war specifically against any kind of strong masculinity within the human sphere, so that you have people who are you have that strong male protector instinct bred out of society, so people will never say no, and they will lay down to domination and control and never offer resistance, because men in general have traditionally been the gender that has stood up and physically fought back against tyrants throughout history when they have, and they want that dynamic bred out of society. So they're going to do that now epigenetically. And we're seeing all kinds of emasculated men in our society who, don't want to stand up to the state and don't want to even talk about these issues. The New Age movement is another way that this is done epigenetically. Putting ideas into people's minds that there's no such thing as the proper role for self-defense. There's no such thing as the proper role of ever physically fighting anyone back. That this whole idea that, there's no role for the defensive use of force in society. And that's totally cutting off that sacred masculine aspect of what I call the two pillars of enlightenment, the sacred feminine, of course, being the non-aggression principle. But you have to combine that in that sacred union with the sacred masculine principle of self-defense and always maintain that capacity. It doesn't mean that you're going to become aggressive. It means that you have to maintain the right to, defend yourself when harm is being done to you, when violence is being done to you. And they want to breed that out of society. And they don't want this strengthening between the sexes, between the genders. They want a dividing of the ways, an atomization. When men and women are at each other's throats, and when men and women are atomized, and that familial dynamic, that strong familial dynamic between men and women is weakened in society. inevitably, throughout history, there's a historical pattern. Whenever that familial dynamic is weakened, the state is strengthened. And that's exactly why they want to wage this epi-eugenic mind control war against the population to divide the male and female genders amongst each other, and then the children of the society are not being brought up with proper parenting. They're not being given good moral guidelines and good moral foundations in our society. They grow up to be nihilistic or hedonistic or morally relativistic, or I'll just call it what it really is, satanic. They're being raised in a satanic mindset. And this is why we see further and further slavery, control, lockdown of society, loss of freedom. This is the underlying causal reason, the causal factor of why society is being turned into a slavery system. Okay, it's the overarching natural law, which I call the law of freedom, is that freedom is directly proportional to morality. As there is more morality in the aggregate in any given culture or in any given society, the freedom of that society increases, and the people become more free because they are responsible and they are moral individuals in the aggregate sense. And when morality wanes in the aggregate, in the whole collective of society, because all the individuals are immoral and morally relativistic and generally living in a satanic ideology, invariably this law works directly proportional. Okay, as the society becomes more immoral, the freedom of that society is taken away. It wanes along with the morality of that society. You cannot separate morality and freedom. As a society is becoming more moral, it is becoming more free. As a society is becoming less moral, in other words, more immoral, that society invariably is becoming more enslaved.
I'm just going to say, this is coming out of my mouth like right now, is that, because I was just thinking about this recently, that the more outrageous, extreme, and sociopathological the powers that be behave, the more the people at the bottom are going to pay. And so the more enslaved the people at the bottom are going to be. Like there's no escaping that.
Sure. I mean, as more people are willing to play the devil's game, so to speak, and continue to support this immoral control system, I talk about this with friends all the time. You're just in my personal life. And we wonder, how could anyone go and do a job on a daily basis that supports this control system?
Yeah.
I don't care whether you're involved in banking, military, law, media, medicine. It's almost unfathomable for me to believe that these people will go and work within this immoral system thinking that they're doing something good. See, I'm an extremist in the sense that I will not work within this system. I will not do it. I will die homeless, penniless, and starving in the street before I give my body and mind over to this immoral system. Because I'm not afraid to lose my physical flesh.
Ditto.
Okay? My soul is infinitely more important to me than that. So I will not support that system by working within that system. I'm not going to do it, So, don't get me wrong. There are things, I'm going to do to basically live in the world. That doesn't mean that you have to go and live in the jungle someplace. Okay, I'm not one of these people that says if you don't like the system, move. I want to make all the people who are propping up this system move figuratively. Basically get out of their mindset and stop supporting it and holding it up. Okay, but I would never tell people, go and be some ascetic living in the middle of nowhere with no possessions. I don't think that's necessary. That's another form of extremism. We need to be in the world but not of it. Find something moral to do. Find something that doesn't harm other people. But to take part in this system, with all the absolute inequities, iniquities, injustices, and outright immoral behaviors that are done within this whole system. I just can't believe how many people go to work on a daily basis and for a paycheck cause harm to others. And they don't even see that they're causing harm to others. They actually believe that they're doing something that is good or beneficial to society, or that society could not live without. See, that's the whole thing. They want to keep people in fear that if we don't have this immoral system in place, that somehow all things would get so much worse and it would be chaos. The fear of chaos, the fear of breakdown, that is the fear of freedom. It's the fear of real freedom. If you fear chaos, you fear real freedom. And people don't understand that either. The true freedom has to include the possibility of making mistakes, getting hurt, right. Doing the wrong thing, possible chaos, Right. And if you're constantly living in that dynamic of fear, yeah. All that's going to create is slavery. And it's going to create real chaos in society, which is where we're at now. We're already in a situation of chaos, of true chaos. There's no better definition for chaos than slavery and total control over a population. Yeah. Living in fear, that's a chaotic mindset. There's nothing orderly in that. There's nothing that inspiring in that. There's nothing creative in that. There's certainly nothing freeing about it. So what people have to understand is that we have to come out of this fear-based mindset of, if there wasn't all these control systems in place, how would we live? We would find ways of living without this control system. People are very intuitive. They're very inventive. We have created so much technology that we could use for powerful and positive purposes that doesn't have to lead to control. I just can't believe so many people continuously justify the evils of this system. Yeah. They justify all the violence that is inherent in this system through government, and they justify the monetary system, and they justify, the pharmaceutical system, et cetera, and so forth. It's all things that have suppressed true human potential, and it's all done because people at the very top of all of these institutions want to keep their power, they want to keep their money, they want to keep their influence, they don't want real human potential peeking through and creating something better than what we have now. They're suppressing cures for a lot of different things. They're suppressing a lot of transformative technologies, and people are allowing it to happen. We're doing it to ourselves because there's people out there who will still take a paycheck to say, you keep your mouth closed about this, or you just put your head down and work on this and don't ever look into any of these other things. It's just, that's what Satanism is about. Satanism is about your God being a piece of paper, okay? Morality being essentially meaningless, you not having the courage to say no to immorality and evil. That's what a satanic society looks like. We're in a satanic society. America is a satanic culture. Essentially, the entire world is a satanic culture. And until people develop the courage to say no to this immoral system, stop working within it, stop supporting it. Millions of people need to quit their jobs. Exactly. Millions of people need to quit their jobs. I don't know how much more plainly I can say it. If you're working within this immoral system, you need to quit it. You need to quit your job. I don't care what that means for you. I don't care how much you have to suffer. If you have to suffer until you find something else that is moral for you to do to make your daily bread, then that is what you have to do. You have to suffer. Your family may have to suffer. Physical suffering in the short term is going to be a lot easier and a lot less hard on an individual than the kind of soul suffering that's going to have to be done in the long term if people continue to stay in these immoral professions. It's the concept that in Buddhism was called right livelihood. You have to look at what you do and get up and do on a daily basis and say, is this really, really necessary in the world? And is this really doing good? Or is it a corrupt system at its core and it's ultimately causing more harm than good? How many cops go to work on a daily basis and still try to find ways of locking up people who are putting a substance into their own body or dealing with a voluntary transaction of a substance, because they say it's a controlled substance? And first of all, the vast majority of the information that's put out by the government based on lies and complete scientific fraud, is completely inaccurate when it comes to the danger of certain compounds. Like, for instance, cannabis is a Schedule I compound federally in the United States. I mean, imagine this. That means the federal government makes the claim that it has absolutely zero medical benefits, even though anybody can go up on PubMed and pull down about 20,000 documents stating unequivocally how cannabis has tens of thousands of medical applications. Okay? And this has been known for decades and decades and decades. Okay? And because the pharmaceutical can't patent it and they want to make money on all the suffering that other people are going through by selling them drugs and surgery, they don't want any knowledge coming out about how cannabis is basically practically a panacea for just about every disease that is known to man. I mean, not everyone, but you'd be surprised how many. And, but yet police will go to work on a daily basis and they'll oppress people for using a plant, okay, and think that they're doing something wholesome for society because they're quote-unquote upholding the law. No, that's called slavery, because to say that someone cannot put what they choose to put into their body, into their own body, is a claim of ownership on that person's body. That's called slavery. Prohibition of any kind, of any substance, is slavery. Whether anybody recognizes that or not, understands it or not, doesn't matter. That's what it is. It's slavery. And, the whole thing with cannabis, I mean, you look at the LD50 of a substance like cannabis, cannabis is safer than tap water, ladies and gentlemen, yep. Okay? You can drink, if you drank 6 liters of tap water in under 15 minutes, more likely than not, you would die. Okay, that's the LD50, the lethal dosage 50 of standard American tap water, is 6 liters in 15 minutes. If you drank that much water, 50% of the population, out of a sample of the population, 50% of people would die from drinking that much water. Okay, that's how many toxins and undissolved solids are in everyday drinking water. Okay, municipal drinking water. Cannabis, you'd have to consume in some form 1,500 pounds of it in 15 minutes, which is physically impossible. Okay, the LD50 of cannabis is infinitely higher than everyday tap water, and it has infinitely more medical benefits than just about any drug that's patented on the market. And it's safer. And yet the lies about it, are just accepted by people who are order followers, and then they go and do what they're ordered to do for a paycheck. And people don't think that's evil. That's the definition of evil. You're doing something against someone else's natural rights to ingest what they wish to ingest in their body, or to, give that or sell it freely to other people. Just taxation in general. There's another thing people don't think of as slavery. All these politicians, wanting to tax everything, and argue about how much should be taxed. People never even look at the fact that if you make a claim on the product of someone else's labor, which was done with their physical body and the sweat of their brow, you're making a claim on their body. You're claiming that you own the product of their labor, which they produced with their body and mind. And that's a claim on the body and mind, And people don't ever look at it from this perspective of getting it down to brass tacks, getting down to the underlying, philosophy, getting down to the underlying principles about right and wrong behavior. They only look at the external manifestations, and they look at, what if we didn't have this kind of legislation and we didn't have taxation? How would we do this or that or the other thing? Well, it doesn't make a difference if how you're doing this, that, or the other thing is based on violence, is based on theft, is based on slavery. It's immoral, and that methodology should be thrown out, and it shouldn't be accepted as valid, because anything that's immoral is invalid. And you have a society that just looks the other way. They have been totally conditioned to accept things, as they are on their face value, as they've been told that they are. They never look at it from a deeper philosophical standpoint of principles, of moral principles.
I want to completely like agree with your whole quit your job thing. I mean, I've done that my whole life because I guess I was like really naive. I still am naive, even though I know a lot more today. But when I started on this whole path, decades ago, I thought most people did what I did. I thought I gave the world too much credit. I mean, I really thought it was much more of a healthier place now that I've come to realize that it is. And I thought people struggled with the same things that I struggled with. And really believing that money and doing what you believe in kind of should go together, and getting paid to be who you are and say what you want to say in life was kind of like the goal that most people were kind of, shooting for. So obviously that's not the truth. But also one of the tenets that you were talking about before about the people who don't believe in right or wrong, or they don't believe in any kind of natural law or consequences to their behavior, and they think that it's natural that we have this few powering over the many is natural. Right. Again, I mean, they're coming from an unnatural mindset, which makes them see things unnaturally. I mean, it's logical, I guess, that they're going to see their unnaturalness as being natural. Right. Because this is why I know that this, again, it's very idealistic way of thinking with my whole sort of yoga and alignment stuff, and being, why I really do like yoga practice is that it brings you back to reality. It's like kind of sharpening your knife every once in a while. Sure. You got, and fitness, you have to come back to reality. You have to come back to what is real, and that's right. And what the consequences of your actions, those things are real. The very things that those people are dismissing, the evidence that's right in front of your face. And so, I mean, I just really, it's kind of pretty scary. I just call it decapitation. People have just been virtually decapitated. Sure. And the mind-body connection and meditation and being in the present moment. I try to post as often as I can. We're in a serious health crisis. I mean, a mental health crisis. Without a doubt. I mean, holy, I'm not supposed to curse, but Jesus. I mean, I mean, we're living in, it's just completely, blatantly psychotic. I mean, blatant psychosis. We have leaders and these people that, they just had the GOP or whatever, Trump and Jeb Bush and whoever the freaking hell else is goddamn running, because I really don't follow it all that much, because, I mean, it's just, craziness. And before the show ends, and because for the 9/11 discussion that I want to get into, there's just a bit of this discussion between Chris Christie and Rand Paul talking about the Bill of Rights, and I want to play it. It's only a couple of minutes. Sure. And I mean, I guess I'll just do it now, being that I brought it up. I just have to. I didn't think I was going to do it this early, but let me just find it really quickly. Okay, here it is.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to switch topics now and talk a bit about terror and national security. Governor Christie, you've said that Senator Paul's opposition to the NSA's collection of phone records has made the United States weaker and more vulnerable, even going so far as to say that he should be called before Congress to answer for it if we should be hit by another terrorist attack. Do you really believe you can assign blame to Senator Paul just for opposing the bulk collection of people's phone records in the event of a terrorist attack?
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm the only person on this stage who's actually filed applications under the Patriot Act, who have gone before the federal, the Foreign Intelligence Service Court, who has prosecuted and investigated and jailed terrorists in this country after September 11th. I was appointed U.S. Attorney by President Bush on September 10th, 2001. And the world changed enormously the next day. And it happened in my state. This is not theoretical to me. I went to the funerals. We lost friends of ours in the Trade Center that day. My own wife was 2 blocks from the Trade Center that day at her office, having gone through it that morning. When you actually have to be responsible for doing this, you can do it, and we did it for 7 years in my office, respecting civil liberties and protecting the homeland. And I will make no apologies ever for protecting the lives and the safety of the American people. We have to give more tools to our folks to be able to do that, not fewer, and then trust those people and oversee them to do it the right way. As president, that is exactly what I'll do.
Megan, may I respond?
Go ahead, sir.
I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from innocent Americans. The Fourth Amendment was what we fought the revolution over. John Adams said it was the spark that led to our war for independence. And I'm proud of standing for the Bill of Rights, and I will continue to stand for the Bill of Rights.
And Megan, that's a completely ridiculous answer. I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from other people. How are you supposed to know, Megan?
Use the Fourth Amendment.
How are you supposed to?
Use the Fourth
I'll tell you how you do it.
Get a warrant.
Let me tell you something.
Get a judge to sign a warrant.
Senator.
Wait, Governor Christie, make your point.
Listen, Senator, when you're sitting in a subcommittee just blowing hot air about this, you can say things like that. When you're responsible for protecting the lives of the American people, then what you need to do is to make sure that you use the system the way it's supposed to work.
Here's the problem, Governor. You fundamentally misunderstand the Bill of Rights. Every time you did a case, you got a warrant from a judge. I'm talking about searches without warrants, indiscriminately of all Americans' records, and that's what I fought to end. I don't trust President Obama with our records. I know you gave him a big hug, and if you want to give him a big hug again, go right
ahead. And Senator Paul, the hugs that I remember are the hugs that I gave to the families who lost their people on September 11th. Those are the hugs I remember, and those had nothing to do with politics, unlike what you're doing by cutting speeches on the floor of the Senate, then putting them on the internet within a half an hour to raise money for your campaign, and while still putting our country at risk.
All right, we're going to cut it out there. We have plenty more.
So yeah, that was like 3.5 minutes, and so essentially, right, Chris Christie is over there saying, spy on Americans in order to find terrorism and violate their rights, and milking this whole 9/11, the families, and I went to the funerals and all of that stuff. That I'm sorry, I believe that 9/11 was an inside job without a doubt.
Christie is just a dangerous Nazi. I'll come right out and say it. I mean, this guy is absolutely sick, and what he wants to do to the American public, spying on them and taking more rights away from them, based on this ridiculous story of the 9/11 attacks, that not one part of it makes sense with any other part of it. Still, believing it in his, absolute insane mindset, and all the fearful, naive people out there who still buy into the official story of 9/11, and don't understand the concept, the strategy of a false flag attack, and what it is designed to do, how it's designed to polarize people, how it's designed to get people behind wars of aggression, how it's designed to get people behind the seizing of rights from, the average person, by keeping them in that dynamic of fear of, some kind of evil enemy coming to get them, or, that you need protection from. All, once again, fear-based mindsets. The entire dynamic is always one of fear, and then stepping in as the savior to provide the solution, which always results in more control, more enslavement of the population. And the public, unfortunately, is still too naive and too dumb to understand the tactic. They're too dumb to understand the technique, sadly. They ascribe their moral sensibilities to other people, and that's a big mistake to make, to think because you wouldn't do something evil, that someone else wouldn't do something that's evil. Yeah. And they want to give their responsibility to protect themselves over to others. That's the whole concept of government is, the whole idea. You'll hear minarchists even say things to the effect like, well, the whole purpose of government is to protect freedom, is to protect civil liberties. Well, if you assign that role to a select group of people, are you not, for many, many, many people, giving up that personal responsibility? And therein lies the entire problem. You cannot give away personal responsibility for your own protection to someone else, for your own community's protection to anyone else. This is why we're living with a militarized police force that constitutes a standing army among the population right now.
It's a completely dysfunctional, codependent, relationship, and
sure.
And the problem always keeps coming back to the same thing: is our disconnection from natural law and fitness. And it's like, once we're disconnected from natural law and how it works, this sickness is just going to constantly keep perpetuating itself.
This is wanting to be taken care of and protected. So, the nurturing and caring dynamic is the motherly aspect of a familial dynamic. And then the protective aspect is the masculine or fatherly dynamic of within the familial system. And this is what government always props itself up as, the surrogate family. This is what order followers see the cult of government as. That's why they even join this cult, and that's why they obey its dictates. They actually believe that government is trying to take care of people like a family. Okay, when in fact all it wants to do is control. It is a dysfunctional relationship. It's a relationship based on masters and slaves, on authority, and those who must obey it, which is a master and a slave. And people don't understand it as such, and that's because in some form, the real family dynamic has been destroyed, and people have been let down by that family dynamic, and so they are searching subconsciously, psychologically, for the surrogate family, which then the government steps in as the role of, for many leftists, for many Democrat types, it steps in as the motherly figure, the provider. You'll notice that the leftists and the Democrats, they all want government to be like that nurturing, caring provider. They want it to take care of everybody, And you'll see that the people on the right, the conservative right-wing types, they want government to act as the protector, to go out and police the world and keep everybody safe from everybody else somehow. That's how government's going to work out. And we'll do that by even taking freedom away from people, taking their civil liberties away and spying on them, because it's our role to keep them safe. This is like Big Daddy, it's the father figure, and this surrogate role. People haven't even looked at why is there only two political parties. Because one is the mother and one's the father. One's the surrogate mother in the dysfunctional relationship. One's the surrogate father in the dysfunctional relationship. It all comes down to people really not being grown up, taking full personal responsibility for their own behavior and their own protection. And stop looking to external power, stop looking to external surrogate family members, their surrogate parents. That's what government has psychologically become in most people's minds. That's why they're so attached to it. They're attached to it like a non-grown child, A small child is attached to a parental relationship. They don't want to grow up and take personal responsibility for their own behavior and their own protection.
Well, right. I mean, I was going to say with the child, it's not that they don't want to. It's that they're not being raised that way. They can't break away. But the right, and then when they become adults, then they don't want to because they've been like dependent for so long. What I was also gonna talk about a little bit was, and then when like I feel like people they do get so used to dysfunctional relationships, especially when I hear people say things like, voting for the president, like when you have to pick the lesser of two evils, like that's one of my favorites. But then when people like Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning, who now they're threatening to put in indefinite solitary confinement for having an expired tube of toothpaste in a Vanity Fair magazine, and these people that are trying to have a healthy and fit relationship with the public and actually stand up and, do good for the people. And look what happens to them. It's like, where are the people on their behalf after what these people did, for the public?
Right.
Like, yeah. I'm like, well, so
half of them look at people like that as traitors.
Yeah.
Because they're so worried about national security.
Like, give me a break.
What about people's rights to privacy, first and foremost? I mean, this is something that America is allegedly founded upon, principles of individual freedom. And, people who call themselves American think that, it's that it all comes down to this dynamic of fear, that they think that there is some lethal enemy that's waiting to come around the corner and grab us by the throat, that they've put us in fear of. This is what government always does to try to justify its existence. Keep people in fear, keep them scared, keep them thinking that if you didn't have us, there would be chaos and you'd be, under attack from all angles. So we have to understand, we do not need these incursions into our freedoms and rights. I'll take my chances with my own protection. I don't want government's protection. I don't want the police's protection. They're a mafia. This is a mafia. It's a dark occult mafia. Yeah. And I don't want their protection. I'm not going to pay them protection money in the form of taxation. I, don't want anything to do with their system, including their so-called protection or services. I want them to go away, leave me alone, leave me to my rights, leave me to a world of dangerous freedom. This is what people have to understand. I don't live my life in fear of what might happen. This is what you hear constantly from people who are trying to justify the things that government does to take freedom away or to steal from people. But what if? But what would we do if we didn't have this in place or that in place? I don't care about any of those dynamics, ladies and gentlemen. You can call me selfish. You can call me whatever you want to call me. I care about human freedom first and foremost. Everything else is secondary to that, because if you don't have that, you don't have anything. You don't have any of your rights. You don't have your life actually belongs to someone else if you give that up. Okay? So we have to get out of the fear mentality. As soon as somebody responds with, but what if? You'll never hear me even ever start a sentence with those words, because that's the dynamic of fear right there. That is the mental projection of a fear-based consciousness. But what if? And then you justify something that the government does because you think humanity couldn't do it right. Or, we need this set of protections in place. I don't need any protection in place other than a moral community. A moral community is the best protection that humanity can ever have. Because if people understand natural law, they'll deal very quickly and efficiently with the psychopaths that they would recognize as psychopathic criminals when they perform the actions that they perform that harm other people, and they would not believe that they have some magical right to perform those harmful actions like they believe government does.
And So I have two things to say. So again, like the dysfunctional, abusive family, like what do the people do when your leaders are sociopaths and abusing you, and they're not protecting you, and they're not taking care of you? And again, I always go back to the way that nature works, because ultimately you're supposed to fly out of the nest, and not. The plane is not supposed to stay on the runway. It's supposed to get. That's how I view the family system. It's supposed to be a runway. It's a
system of child abuse right now.
Exactly. Oh, I've been talking about this stuff literally for over 45 years. I know I have to give my age away, but unfortunately, and Benjamin Franklin must be turning over in his grave listening to all of this. How is it possible then? What Chris Christie is saying, that we're protecting the people by violating the very rights of the people that we're supposed to be protecting.
Exactly. It's nonsensical. It's fear-based consciousness. There's no logic or reason in it. And I feel sorry for anybody that believes someone like that believes a total criminal like that. It's sad. It's just sad that people can still be in that low vibratory state of consciousness, believing that our worst enemy is ISIS or Al Qaeda. It's like, if you don't understand that we're facing a infinitely larger threat from government itself than any kind of polarized creation that the intelligence agencies of this country created decades ago, and they blew up, and hey, you could argue whether they got off their leash or whatever, but you know what, we made that mess. That could very well come home to roost for us, because so many people hate our involvement in all these other countries and our building of an empire abroad, through military bases in over 100 countries. Who wouldn't? Who likes a bully like that? No one does. These countries don't want our protection either. We're involved in everybody else's business, thinking that we have some kind of a moral right to go and do that. We don't. And this is what somebody like Christie wants to continue to perpetuate. And I just think he's an extraordinarily dangerous individual who is akin to people who, built the Nazi society and the SS order. It's no different. And anybody that has this mentality has a mentality that is similar to Nazi worship. It's the same basic thing. And I don't care what people want to say about that. They can go and buy into this whole revisionist nonsense about how Hitler was such a great guy. They don't even understand the occult roots of Nazism. They don't understand the occult roots of all totalitarian societies. I know who lays behind the so-called enthroned powers that, are out there visibly, but they're just puppets on strings. They're just dogs on leashes. Occasionally one of them will get off the leash or get off the string and think they're acting on their own, and then their puppet masters will try to deal with them. But the whole point is, they don't look behind the corridors of power to the occult powers that lie behind the scenes. A priest class that is waging an ideological war, that is waging a war against the human spirit, lies behind the political and financial powers. Okay? This priest class you have to look at them as a dark cabal of ancient psychologists that have taken ancient knowledge that has existed for thousands of years. I would make the claim it has existed for tens of thousands of years. And they're taking all of that knowledge that they have accrued throughout the centuries about how the human mind works. They're keeping it back as much as possible from other people, or discouraging them from looking into it. And as a result of that knowledge differential, they're wielding a power differential over the general public. Because just think about it from this perspective. I give people this example all the time, okay? If I was the most advanced psychologist living on the planet Earth today, no one in the world knew more about the human mind than I did, okay, let's just say. And I were of the mindset to want to wield that kind of knowledge in a negative way over someone who had never looked into psychology for a moment in their lives, did not understand anything about how the human mind worked, how the human motivations and desires worked for anybody, much less themselves, okay, had no knowledge. They were like a naive child. And if I wanted to wield all of that psychological knowledge, that knowledge differential that exists between us, how easily could I use that to turn a power advantage between me and that other person? How easily could I manipulate their mind? How easily could I, get into their head and get them to start acting the way that I want them to act, or manipulate them or deceive them? It would be child's play. It would be absolutely a piece of cake to do. And that's the situation that we're in because the public is so ignorant.
And that's exactly what I'm always writing in my blog about the family system. I mean, who has more power to completely mind control a child and exploit whatever they want to do than a parent?
That's right. The so-called parent. If they were doing that, they're not really morally uplifting or truly educating or truly raising the child. That is entering into a dysfunctional and abusive relationship. Yeah. And this is what government not has become, but has always been. It's always been this so-called authority figure that thinks it's the parent here, that thinks it has the authority over other people, okay, which is just a master-slave relationship. The true parenting relationship has nothing to do with authority and master-slave. It has to do with stewardship and properly morally raising someone in a non-violent way, okay, by truly raising them morally and educating them properly, which education truly means to lead out of. And what you're leading someone out of is darkness, the darkness of ignorance, by giving them knowledge, by raising them up, by not keeping them in the dark, by giving them the information that they need to know and understand, not holding it back from them, not occulting it.
Right.
So there's never been any legitimacy to any form of government. It's always been mind control. It's always been authority. It's always been based in the idea that there's one class of masters that get to make the rules and another class of slaves that have to obey those rules, unquestioningly. It's never been anything good. It's never helped anybody. It's never, aspired to bring people to, a better way of living with each other, treating each other justly and morally. And the only way we're going to do that is by getting rid of this outdated and unnecessary institution and replacing it with real education, real parenting, real moral upbringing, real education, and a deep understanding of natural law, of the difference between right and wrong, and then, cultivating conscience so that we willfully, of our own free will accord, we know the difference between right and wrong, and we're going to choose the right action over the wrong action. That's the only way this society will ever change. Until it becomes more moral, it cannot become more free.
I call the parents the original too big to jails.
Yeah, right.
I mean, exactly, because any time when I was growing up, I used to try to hold those in power accountable. It was always oh, you can't blame your parents, and oh, your poor parent or whatever, and oh, they couldn't teach you because nobody ever taught them, Right. So it was this, it was a given when I was growing up that the kid was here to inherit the bill. I mean, they almost kind of made no bones about it. You can't hold those in power accountable. The debt always, gets passed on to the one who can afford it the least.
And see, that's the insidious thing about this whole dysfunctional relationship, the breakdown of the familial dynamic. People are still having children, and they teach their bad habits and their bad thought patterns down to the next generation, and it becomes like a self-running system. Yeah. It becomes something that is perpetuating a self-perpetuating system. That's why it's so important to understand that we have to break this cycle. This is an abuse victim cycle. Yeah. Okay, where then the parents, quote unquote, who are dysfunctional, are teaching dysfunctional things to the children. That's a form of abuse. And then they become the abusers of the next generation, and the next generation becomes their victims. This is what I call the abuse victim cycle. And what we need to do is break that. The only way that can be broken is through applied knowledge, care, and right action. That's it. Until people have the knowledge of the difference between right and wrong, they take it into themselves, they understand that it's objective, it's not up to them. A right is an action that does not cause harm to another being. A wrong is an action that does cause harm to another being. This is distinctly different than vices. A lot of Christians don't understand morality, so-called Christians. I call them Christians in name only, okay? These are people who think because they find something objectionable that somehow it's a wrong, okay? If you don't like, people thought anybody who smoked in the past was immoral, okay? Or drank in the past was immoral, or smoked cannabis, okay? Vices are not crimes, okay? You can do something that can be considered objectionable, or it is looked at as something that someone else doesn't find attractive, or maybe even finds deplorable in some way, but it does not necessarily harm someone else, okay? So an action actually has to involve some form of coercion or theft. You have to be taking away life, rights, or property. Okay? Life, rights, or property for there to be a transgression against natural law, for there to be an immoral behavior involved. If someone else is not being harmed through some form of theft of their life, their rights, their freedom, their free will, or their property, then no wrongdoing has been committed, regardless of how much you may find the behavior distasteful in some way. This isn't about what you like or dislike. This isn't about what you find attractive or non-attractive, okay? This is about whether something is actually coercing someone else, stealing from someone else, harming someone else, or their property. Okay? That's what determines the difference between right and wrong behavior. It's all about ownership. It's about what we own and therefore have a right to do what we want with it, versus what we do not own and therefore we do not have a right to do whatever we want with that thing. Okay?
One topic that we've kind of been touching upon it, that I want to make sure that we get to before so we have like 45 more minutes.
Sure.
One thing that I always notice when I talk to people, not so much activists, thank God, but kind of like the average person is like the 1% or the powers that be or whatever you want to call them, like they're like not part of the equation. Like people will say things to me, like rules or whatever, like, I don't know, be more loving, this, that, or the other thing, instead of going to the people that you should be telling that to, which are, the sociopaths that be. So it's like the little guy is kind of getting criminalized for what the sociopaths do. And because people don't have the courage, or not everybody has the courage to go and confront them and hold them accountable, so unconsciously they just do what's easy and criminalize the little guy. Sure.
I mean, this is part of this whole new age fake variant of karmic consequences, that all this evil is just happening in the world because somehow the people of the world somehow deserve it.
Oh, wait, can I just interrupt you? Because
sure.
I'm sorry, but before I forget, I've actually heard in the past a few times people say that you pick your parents before you're born. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, I've heard the theory. I mean, I can't necessarily, say that it's true or untrue. It very well may be.
I don't think that that's true. I think that that's just sort of another debt-based mentality. Like they want to blame the little guy so bad and put the little guy into so much debt that they blame them for their own abusive parents by blaming them for picking them before they were even born.
Hey, somebody like my good friend Jay Parker, did he pick his parents? I mean, you know, they abused and tortured him as part of a satanic cult, you know, from the time he was young. I mean, who would pick parents like that, you know?
Exactly. So talk about blaming the victim, for God's sake, you know? Like we want to blame the victim so bad that we're going to go even before you even existed, and it's like your fault.
Yeah, it's this idea of this false notion of karma, you know, that is so prevalent in New Age circles. I mean, I heard somebody say all the evil in the world is just karma being revisited, you know, karmic debt being revisited down on people, and it's like it excuses evil behavior. You know, well then what gives them that gives them the right to do it? Then if they're doing evil in this life, then what? More evil's got to be done to them in the next one, in their next incarnation?
Yeah, because
it doesn't make any sense.
It's exactly right. I mean, it's just another way to blame the victim and be lazy and not go after the perpetrators.
Right, exactly.
And just to elaborate, like I was having a phone conversation just last week or whenever it was with somebody that I really admire. They're actually in the documentary America, Freedom to Fascism. What's Aaron Russo's documentary?
Great documentary.
And so, you know, we were getting into this whole victimization conversation thing, and you know, I really like this person, and I think that they did a great thing in the Freedom to Fascism documentary, but they were coming more from this like religious perspective, and again, like talking about victims and neediness and people shouldn't be needy. They were saying, you know, like because when you're needy, you know, it turns people off, and you know, you don't get what you need and things like that. Which, to a point, I was kind of agreeing with, but then I'm thinking to myself, but what if you're legitimately needy, you know? Like, why are we not blaming those who are not helping the needy? Like, why are we blaming people for being needy? I mean, like, it's like you're criminalizing nature, like you're criminalizing natural law. You know, like, why is somebody who's legitimately in need like a criminal, but yet the psychopaths that have, again, like a gazillion times more than they need and are criminals a gazillion times over, you know, not held accountable?
Yeah, this is another part of this New Age and nonsensical religious notion of like prosperity spirituality. Like, you know, the most prosperous are obviously the best among us, this theory or religion claims. You know, you'll see Christians, fake Christians, I should preface it as, you know, believing in this notion that, oh, the super rich, super elite, you know, of our society, they got that way because they're better people. And the people who are, you know, of these lower income classes, somehow they're not as good of people because the Lord hasn't blessed them with prosperity and wealth. You know, I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, if you understand, if anything, the richest people in the world are the most psychopathic and they're the most dispassionate. They, you know, they don't care about the well-being of others. I mean, 80 people, you know, around less than 100 people own like over half the world's wealth. Yeah. I mean, you just think about that. That's so crazy. Yeah, you know, that's not legitimate ownership.
It's pathological.
Yeah, that's fear-based, scarcity-based mentality. And it's not legitimate ownership, you know. People who excuse all the corporatism and, you know, see, certain people hear everything I say and they'll say, oh, you're a far right-wing extremist. And then they'll hear other things I say, oh, you're a far left-wing extremist. No, I'm neither left nor right-wing. I know that there are such things as religion that hold people back from the discovery of truth. And there's many different kinds of religion. I mean, there's the cultural religions, which we look at as the world religions, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Islam, Buddhism, etc. Those are forms of religion that hold people back from truth. There's science in the modern world, which is all government funded. It's not legitimate science. It's all, I call it paradigm protecting science. That's holding back cures, holding back technologies because they want to make more and more money. And all the research that's done is all government funded. So if they don't want something understood or put out there to the public, they don't fund it. You know, that's not science. That's corporate science, if you will, or government science, which it shouldn't even be called science. You have the New Age movement. That's another form of religion holding people back from true spirituality. And then you have, you know, money. You know, well, of course, government is a big religion. You know, I mean, we talked about that one. That's a huge cult. And then you have money, which is the ultimate religion. It's the biggest religion in the world. You know, people who think that, you know, somehow because they have money and they can acquire resources, that they have some right to hold back all these resources from people who actually need them. And that isn't to say, I think, their assets should be seized, their wealth should be redistributed, they should be forced to pay taxes. It's just people have to transcend that form of consciousness of scarcity and fear and recognize there are more than enough, infinitely more than enough resources for everybody to live comfortably on this planet. The people who don't believe that and who think there's all this overpopulation and who think there's such limited, scarce resources don't understand how abundant the energy of the universe is. They're living in a scarcity-based mindset, which is a mindset of fear that can only create chaos and disorder. Until we understand we're all in the same situation together, there is enough to go around for everyone to live in prosperity and comfort with technology. We don't need to be Luddites and, you know, say we need to all go back to living like we did in the Neolithic age or something like that. No. I mean, there is enough on this planet if we use the resources that we have at our disposal wisely, if we use them responsibly, if we develop clean technologies, if we develop clean sources of energy, you know, there's enough to go around for everyone 10 times, 100 times over.
Yep. I attempted to make this sort of comparison, like these two columns, like I wanted to compare man's system or man's law and you know, up against like natural law and this sort of short list that I made.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know how great I did at it, but, you know, so I listed things under man's law, like with things like, you know, taxes, the IRS, debt, you know, labor for money, government, the overseer, police, justice, you know, family, patriarchy, authority, and garbage, pollution. And then under natural law, you know, there's no abuse of power under natural law. There's no debt. There's fair trade. You know, natural law, again, would be like the governing body. There's balance, mutual respect. And, you know, again, natural law would be the authority. And there's no garbage or pollution. And
Right.
There's just cleanliness and efficiency under natural law. You know, so
When we do things in harmony with the laws of morality, you're going to always generate maximum order and efficiency. The more outside of that balance that we work, the more chaos, disorder, and harm is always going to result within that system. That's what people have to understand about natural law. These laws don't exist in the universe to
Right.
confine or restrain us. They exist to actually provide our maximum comfort,
Right.
our maximum creativity, our maximum harmony. You know, that's why people shouldn't see them, you know, as restrictions. I look at them as boundary conditions that are where harm results to others. That's all. So in other words, the universe is basically the intelligence, the creative intelligence of the universe. You could call that God if you want. I'm perfectly comfortable with that term. People who are extremely left-brained hate that word. They, you know, because they're atheistic and they don't want to acknowledge a higher power or a higher force of creation other than the human mind, which is the most egotistical and out of balance thing I think that you could possibly do. That's why so many Satanists are atheistic, you know, because they want to believe man is the highest power in creation. But, you know, aside from that, you know, they don't want to accept that this force exists in the universe not to act as some kind of a restrictive prison system. It's simply saying to us, this creative intelligence is simply saying, you can create anything you want to create, as long as you are acting within these general parameters of don't cause harm to other people, to other beings. Let other beings live their lives. Do not do harm unto them. And people insist this cannot be done. They'll say, oh, well, we have to consume something for sustenance to eat, okay? And they think, well, they're going to lump plants and animals in the same category. You'll hear this argument, well, a plant has a form of consciousness, and if we eat plants, then we're causing harm. It's not the same as a sentient being, Yeah. This is why, a lot of people who have arguments against, a vegetarian way of life, try to prop this up as some kind of an argument that the plants and animals are the same consciousness or the same thing. No, they are not. That's why one of them is called a plant, one of them is called an animal, okay? The animal is sentient, while the plant is not sentient in the same way that the animal is. You could argue for plant sentience, but it's not the same as animal sentience. When I talk about natural law, it applies to beings that are capable of understanding the difference between right and wrong. It doesn't apply to the animal kingdom or the plant kingdom. Or it doesn't apply to the lower animals. It applies to animals that have developed the brain like we have, that has the capacity for the understanding of the difference between right and wrong. Therefore, we have that responsibility. And people will say, well, when a lion goes and hunts in the jungle, is it breaking natural law? No, it's not, because you can't sit there and talk with a lion about morality. Yes, that's why natural law does not apply to that lion. Okay, yeah, they're operating in the natural world, okay, but natural law you have to look at as moral law, as the law that governs the consequences of behaviors that we perform onto other beings. Me going out for no reason with a rifle and shooting a lion is a violation of natural law, because I've taken a life that I do not have the right to take. I don't own that lion's life. That lion owns its life. That's the possessive pronoun. And it's the lion's life. It's its life.
And the lion wasn't attacking you or anything.
Right. Now, if you are being attacked, then you have a right to defend yourself, and with deadly force if necessary. Absolutely. Because if one being comes at another being to try to, take its life, then, hey, the gazelle has every right to try to kill the lion or whatever, the ox, whatever animal, okay? It's, we have to understand those are the limits. If harm is being attempted, then you have a right to defend yourself. Just don't cause harm. Don't actively go out and try to cause harm to other beings. It's not that complex. It's actually very, very simple if you think about it. Yet people still can't get it. They still can't raise their consciousness to that simple level of don't do to other beings what you don't want done to you. You don't want to be harmed. You don't want to be robbed. You don't want to be stolen from. You don't want to have your rights violated. Then don't do those things to other people. It's the apophatic, or the negative variation of the golden rule, which is, treat others as you would like to be treated. I look at it in the negative sense. Don't treat others in ways that you would not want to be treated yourself. It's very simple. Don't do to others what you don't want done unto you. And if people just lived like that, this control system would fall overnight.
So if we could expand a little bit on the whole self-defense, because I feel like this is where society is stuck and is going to stay stuck, again, because we are disconnected from natural law. And I always, hear the term nonviolence, organizations and activism and groups that... protest groups or demonstrations, talking about nonviolence, but they're applying the term nonviolence to themselves rather than to the sociopaths.
Right. So the police who come in and violate their rights without any right to do so. See, that's the thing. It's like, if police are trying to shut down free assembly and free speech anywhere, the people have a right to physically defend themselves from that action.
I think of martial arts. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I feel like we need like mental and physical martial arts, or just something, because people really need to learn. That's right. You have a right to self-defense, and the line has been so shifted over. Like, people have been so used to being oppressed that whole
think their oppressors have the right to do this to them,
and that they're the ones being violent when they're defending themselves.
Well, I give you an example. If a mugger accosts me on the street as I'm walking out in open territory and demands my possessions at the threat of bodily harm, whether with a knife, a club of some kind, or a gun, and I have my own capacity to defend myself on my body in the form of some weapon, and I beat him to the punch and either knock him out or kill him, only one act of violence was committed there, folks, and it was not done by the person who harmed the attacker. This is what the difference between violence and defensive use of force is. This is where we have to get out of semantical mind control games through the obfuscation of the definitions of words. Self-defense is not violence.
Exactly. I am saying that all the time. I mean, people need to realize that. You need to draw the line. Like, this is, I'm always thinking of everything in terms of either being in debt or being, on the plus side. And when someone is being violent to you, they're the aggressor. They're the one crossing the line and transgressing into your rights and violating you. So self-defense is just bringing things back to homeostasis and balance where it's supposed to be.
And the key determining factor of whether the act was violent is who initiated it. The only thing that matters is who started it, because violence is the initiation or the beginning of taking a forceful, coercive action that you did not possess the right to take. Okay? That's the definition of violence. And hence, in the initiation of that undue force, of that unrightful force, you just violated someone else's rights. Hence, an act of violation occurred. You did something that was coercive against their free will. You did something that was taking of their life, their rights, or their property. And that is not what defensive force is. Defensive force is a right. If someone comes at you with violence, you have a right to defend yourself with defensive force. So just like a mugger comes at me, I have the right to defend myself and my property with defensive force. If someone tries to take a right away from the public, regardless of why the reason is, okay, they believe they have the right, they believe it's the law, they believe they have the right to quote-unquote enforce that law, there is no such thing as a legitimate law that disallows for people to assemble and speak, okay? Any law like that is completely unlawful. It's no law at all. And, all man's laws are illegitimate because either an action is in compliance with natural law and therefore it's a right. And therefore, if you say you write it down, you're just, it's like saying, well, the sky refracts the blue hue in the color spectrum during a cloudless day. That's a fact. Writing it down isn't going to change it or make it any more, true or less true, And so it's just redundancy. And if a man's law is outside of the scope of natural law, and it's therefore causing harm, it's a wrongdoing, then there's no legitimacy to it, and it doesn't need to be obeyed. If somebody is saying, I'm going to write down this law that says we have a right to stop people from exercising their rights, that's an illegitimate law. Right. Like, for example, concealed carry permits, all illegitimate. You're writing down something that says you need to come to me to be allowed to exercise a right of self-defense. Is putting a gun on your hip and concealing it with a shirt and walking outside a right for everyone? Of course it's a right. It's not a privilege. Because in doing that behavior, you have not harmed anybody. You know, if you go and use that firearm unlawfully against somebody, meaning you cause harm, you initiate violence with it, you don't have the right to use it that way. You know, that, I mean, people have to understand common sense reality and stop thinking about things in terms of legal.
Well, yeah,
legal and illegal are meaningless terms.
Exactly.
All that matters is whether something is moral or immoral.
Exactly.
They're two totally different worlds.
Okay. I was just going to add that, you know, once the people have not exercised their rights for so long, and now it's becoming so apparent that they kind of need them, you know, it's a little bit late to start, you know, trying to exercise to get to the point where you kind of should have been a long time ago. And that's why I've always really truly believed that health was wealth, and fitness was wealth, and knowledge was wealth, and mental fitness is wealth, because you know, the one thing that I can't sometimes take listening to is when people refer to the 1% as wealthy.
Right.
I'm like, stop using that term. You know, call things what they are. Having a lot of pieces of paper that man makes out of nothing, how in God's name does that make somebody truly wealthy? I mean, that is like not accurate. I just feel like it's a complete false term. Like you need to measure things against what nature makes.
The real value system is morality. This is what people have confused. They think that these pieces of paper are value. They're valuable. No, they're not valuable. They have nothing to do with values. Values are principles. Values are morals. Values are based in truth.
Right.
You know? This is imaginary pieces of paper backed by absolutely nothing but people's erroneous faith in it. You know, let's just go back to what you were saying regarding, you know, people. You were talking about something right before you talked about like value. You were saying
self-defense.
No. I lost my train of thought. I wanted to comment on something that you said regarding rights, but let's just continue on.
Exercising rights? Or?
Oh, exercise. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Exercise, you know, if you don't exercise, then things go out of shape.
Right.
You know, and they can be very difficult to get back in order and shape.
See, that's,
you know, it's like we use these terms, exercise rights. You know, what happens if you don't exercise muscles? They atrophy. And if, you know, somebody throws a heavy object at you, you're not going to be able to hold it. You know, you're going to falter and fail, you know, because your muscles aren't strong. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to an understanding of rights. If you don't exercise those rights, they atrophy and you lose them over time. You know, it's a very, you know, parallel with fitness. You know, we need to be exercising not only the body, but the mind. Mind will get weak if it's not exercised, and your rights will get weak if they're not exercised.
When I was growing up and, you know, getting traumatized, it wasn't instinctual for me to say, I got to go out into the world and make a lot of money. You know, again, it was just a natural thing, as natural as it is when you're thirsty, you go and get water. I went to the gym. I mean, I didn't, you know, of course, you know, you do need money, but it was not my immediate attraction. Wasn't to say I got to go out and make a lot of money. I mean, maybe if I was looking to get back, or I don't know, maybe I should have been in more of a mindset of revenge and said, you know, I don't know. Sometimes, like, I think I should have done that because, you know, just acquire all this money and power and then just turn around and do to others what was done to me and just like abuse people. But it was accruing wealth. I mean, it was my body's attempt to repair itself and to try to replace what I felt undoubtedly was taken from me. And it was just so sort of commonsensical to build wealth through studying and reading and fitness on all the levels. I mean, that just kind of seemed, and then I thought money would kind of start flowing in after that, you know, once you have real wealth. But again, I had no idea that the system was as despicable as it is, and that most people are going in the direction of money at the expense of natural law and common sense.
And I mean, this is what the whole breakdown of morality is in society, and you see it. I think it's seen very readily and clearly in interpersonal relationships between men and women, where money has become the value system. And whether somebody is actually moral or immoral is almost neglected and not even talked about in many cases. Often until much later in the relationship when, they will realize, hey, this money stuff is really just getting in the way of a positive, healthy relationship between two people. And, what we really should have been concerned about is whether this person was a trustworthy, moral human being.
I'm attempting to try to bring up. I watched Cornel West and Chris Hedges.
Okay.
I like Chris Hedges. I like Cornel West. And Cornel West said something really good, kind of what we were talking about before about. I'm trying to find it in this video. I just hope. I don't remember the exact time. It's only a 25-minute video, but let me just try to, he talked about forgiveness and how it's pathological to forgive people who, violated you or wronged you, which I hear.
While you're trying to find that, I could speak on that dynamic because that's something I've talked a lot about, especially in my New Age BS seminar and my Factors of True Awakening in my Streetwise Spirituality seminar. We have to understand that true forgiveness is not about endlessly excusing someone's bad behavior and giving them more opportunities to harm you. It's not about turning the other cheek in that regard, which did not mean that. True forgiveness is about when someone is sorry, that you're willing to give them a chance one more time to correct their behavior and stop doing the harmful things that they were doing, and you won't take repercussive action upon them. Where you're going to say, hey, I'm going to give you this chance, forgive them, to not continue to do this, and then, we'll be okay. But if you continue to do it, no, people have to be held accountable for what they do.
Right.
And that's what real forgiveness is about. It's not for just, people think that, releasing something from your own, not dwelling on.
Exactly. It does you good to forgive people.
That's
that
not
is the
forgiveness.
biggest
That's
bull.
release from the attachment about the action, okay? Not reliving it over and over again and staying attached to it. Letting go is different than real forgiveness. You can let go of a harmful behavior, not continue to relive it and let it affect you. But that's not what actually forgiving a human being for doing something harmful is all about. We have to understand the discernment between those two things.
I always go back to natural law, and I say, well, what does natural law say? I mean, does natural law forgive? Nature does not forgive. What are the consequences? Like, I think just always in terms of nature's affordability, the body's affordability. Can you afford to forgive somebody? Because, I used to hear that so much when I was growing up. Again, like, oh, your poor mother, and this, that, and the other thing. Like you're supposed to let the person off the hook who was abusing you.
Right. Well, I think you can forgive and not forget. You have to stay vigilant, and if somebody proves that they're unworthy or untrustworthy in a certain way, then certainly someone should remain vigilant, even if they do forgive that person and give them another chance. The old saying, fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me.
Right. So then it can turn into enabling. I mean, people heard the term enabling and codependency and so anyway, just let me try to see where their conversation is at over here.
Against you, Black Radio.
No, but the reality is that I'm stronger than ever. I'm stronger now than I was 6 years ago. Not just intellectually, but spiritually and politically. You see, The only way they're going to completely snuff me out is to put a bullet in my heart, and death, where is thy sting? Grave, where is thy victory? So in that sense, it's not just me, it's being willing to sustain memory. That's what this book is about. Right. Subversive memory of the great ones who came before, integrity, not cupidity, and then tenacity, spiritual, political tenacity. The only way you snuff us out is to do away with us, and here's more to take one's place. That's also what Ferguson is about. And that, we got more Michael Browns, we got more Tanishas, we got more Tamirs and so forth coming.
And you know, as we had said earlier, the use of lethal force by police against black people, there are just as many black people being shot dead a few decades ago as there are today. Absolutely. But there is a consciousness. Absolutely. Now.
Absolutely. And with a black president, black attorney general, black Homeland Security in the cabinet, all the young folk, elderly folk, men, women still getting shot. How many police going to jail? Hardly any at all. That says something about the system and how decrepit and rotten it is, rather than just somehow being Obama worshipers or worshippers of the newest black politician that come along and say that somehow he or she is going to provide some kind of delivery system of justice.
And does the black prophetic tradition, when you are with activists from Ferguson, is there, after this kind of long hiatus where the black prophetic tradition was successfully pushed to the margins of American intellectual life and American society, do you see a rekindling of it among?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, the rekindling is deep. You don't see it on corporate media.
Right.
Not at all. You see it on your show. You see it in Real News. You see it Amy Goodman. A few other sites. But it's spilling over. And actually, it won't really spill over to corporate media until it constitutes a threat to the status.
But then won't they demonize it?
But it was demonized. But even when you demonize folk who constitute a threat, even that is insufficient and inadequate. But at that point, you either have to make some serious concessions, you have to kill us off, and some new ones take our place, or what we really want, which is fundamental transformation. I'm a revolutionary Christian. I think in the end we need fundamental transformation of capitalism, fundamental transformation of patriarchy, fundamental transformation of white supremacy, male supremacy, homophobia right across the board.
And you name King as a revolutionary, and I think that this is something that we have to grapple with. And it was you who had me read Hofstadter's great essay on vigilante violence, which I use in my book,
the last book,
Ways of Rebellion. But King, you write in Black Prophetic Fire, in many ways understood that we needed a revolution, but feared deeply that we were only capable of a counter-revolution. And that is a reality of America.
That's very real. That's very real. Yeah, it's always a skeleton hanging in one's closet as a progressive revolutionary. But you just don't know. History is so unpredictable. No one has control over it. It looks that way. The evidence tilts in that direction. But you just don't know. It could be the case, for example, that when it comes to the greediness of the big banks, that lo and behold, people who view themselves as conservatives but are deeply victimized, who have an empathy or moral sensitivity, may even come to your side in ways that you hadn't predicted. You just don't know. You fight anyway. But most importantly, it's the issue of integrity, honesty, and decency. Everybody's going to die fairly soon anyway. So the question is, do you want to live a life of integrity, honesty, and decency, tell the truth, and fight for justice? And wherever the consequences flow, let it flow. Martin was like that. I mean, one of the differences between Brother Martin and myself is that he's a pacifist. I'm not a pacifist. I believe nonviolence ought to be pursued, given all of the options. But sometimes you have no alternative but self-defense. No alternative but self-defense.
Well, that's what Malcolm, I can't remember whether it was James Cone or may have been you or somebody wrote that Malcolm didn't have the luxury to be nonviolent.
Well, that's Brother Jim Cone's profound insight, absolutely.
Okay, they said it. Sorry, it kind of took a little bit. I wasn't exactly sure where it was in the video.
Oh, no, that's okay. That was definitely worth playing because, I'm in agreement that, nonviolent methods for change have to be always used because violence is always wrong. But self-defense is a right when we are being accosted with acts that violate our rights. This is what the public has to understand. If individual rights are being violated, self-defense always should be kept on the table. It should never be taken off the table. And we are at a point where our rights are being violated.
They have been for quite some time now. And the way that I look at it is, when people start talking about all that stuff, I think to myself, is a heart attack non-violent? Like, if you neglected your body and abused your body for so long, what are you going to get? Your body is going to give you what you gave it, and it's going to give you a heart attack. I mean, what is your body going to do? Be non-violent back to you? I mean, come on, like, get real.
I mean, we are suffering the consequences of ignorance of natural law. Ignorance of rights is always going to result in those rights atrophying and being degraded and or lost. If you don't pay attention to something and you don't understand it, it's going to die. That's it. I mean, you don't pay attention to a plant and don't water it and don't feed it, it's going to die. A pet, the same thing will happen to that. If we don't pay attention to our rights and we don't care about our rights, we don't give it care and attention, they'll die. That's what's happening in our society because of our ignorance of rights. And how many people can give the simple definition of a right on the street? I mean, how could you possibly protect something if you don't even understand what it is? If you don't understand what it is, how could you possibly care about it enough to be vigilant about it?
And
that's the problem.
What they just said, they were just, Chris Hedges just quoted some Cohen person, or Malcolm X actually, I think it might have been, saying that it was either one of those, Malcolm X didn't have the luxury of being nonviolent. And I agree with that because, again, going back to the exercise and fitness analogy, or the only kind of metaphor that fits, exactly, you have to have been exercising all along your rights. And because they have deteriorated, and now, the chest pains and angina are starting to kind of happen a lot more frequently.
Right.
You can't just now say, okay, well, I'm going to give up, smoking cigarettes and McDonald's, and and think that you're just going to be, super fit.
Because when an illness comes on, what do we have to do, Catherine? We have to make a diagnosis about what the causal factors of the illness is. If you don't treat it from the causal level, all you're treating is symptoms, and then the problem keeps recurring.
Right.
This is what people want to do. They want to put a Band-Aid on things. They want to see, we're going to vote this person into office. Oh, that'll fix the problem. No, you're not addressing it from the causal factors. That's a symptom. We're going to fix the monetary system. We're going to reform that. That's not the causal factor. That's a symptom. The causal factor is human consciousness is in disarray, and people do not understand the difference between right and wrong and don't care. As long as that ignorance remains in the world regarding morality, regarding natural law, and people don't understand how a societal non-understanding of natural law results in human slavery. If you do not understand that dynamic, then you have not come to the understanding of the causal factors. Hence, you have not made a diagnosis. And what is this all about? Knowledge. Knowledge is, without knowledge, a society cannot be free. Without accurate knowledge of natural law, a society is incapable of being a free people. You get to the understanding of the causal factor of why society is sick, why human freedoms are being lost, by making a diagnosis. You look at the word diagnosis itself. Dia in Greek is a prefix which means through, or by way of, or by means of. And then the word gnosis in Greek means knowledge. By way of knowledge, you will understand what is wrong so that you can make the correction to the causal factor and therefore be well again.
And knowledge comes from the body, not just from the mind.
Sure. I mean, there's so much we can learn by tuning into ourselves, our bodies, on bringing the knowledge from higher consciousness and bringing it into the physical form. It's not about just being in that, high level mindset, never actually doing anything right here on the ground in the physical world with that knowledge. Knowledge by itself isn't power. Knowledge applied is power. That's where we convert it into wisdom through right action, through using what we have come to know in the right way, in the moral way.
And how much do you have to leave exactly at 8 o'clock?
Yeah, I'm going to have to cut it at 8 because unfortunately I do once again have another commitment tonight. But we could continue the discussion another time perhaps. And, I'm sure there's many more areas that we can go into. Because
there's somebody asked a question about. The question is, why does Mark replay the standard line that Hitler was a bad guy? Could it be that he was trying to throw out the banksters and they ganged up against him? Has he heard of Diana Spingola's research?
Oh, sure. I mean, of course he was. It was a plan to destabilize Europe, and then bring Nazis into America. But you got to understand, this is an occult order. If you don't understand the occult roots of Nazism, you have no idea about Nazism being beyond a political party. It was a worldwide dark occult religion with all of the same rituals and belief systems of dark occultism today. People who are apologists for Nazis and, the Hitler regime and have all this revisionist nonsense beliefs about how he was so great because he did eventually go off his leash and stand against some of those same international financiers that propped him up to begin with. They don't really understand how worldwide political and occult machinations really work. They haven't looked deep enough into it. They have a cursory understanding, but not a deep understanding of it. It's another topic I will eventually be going into with probably a full-fledged presentation or a podcast series at some point on the occult roots of Nazism. So I would suggest an individual like that to look much deeper into it and understand how dark occultism actually formed that entire political party, religion, cult, if you will, and machinated, they were behind the machinations of all of those manipulations in that time period of our Earth's history. So, it's like the people who have watched a couple of documentaries about revisionist history about, Hitler being so wonderful have just, they bought a bill of goods. And it's there to discredit the whole truth and freedom movement by saying, hey, look at all the conspiracies that they buy into, similar to all this flat earther stuff that's going around nowadays, So I don't really give too much credence to any of that because, I've studied into it at a much deeper level, particularly from an occult perspective, a dark occult perspective.
So I'm just going to end and say that everything comes down to natural law and bringing nature back into the equation, which means slowing down, because you were just talking about really looking into things. Like that's the problem is people, they don't slow down enough. They don't really look at things closely enough. That's right. And they
have to get into fundamental principles that deal with the truth. The truth is what will set us free. That was the prescription given in the New Testament for how humanity would be able to free itself. Know the truth, knowledge of the objective difference between right and wrong. That is what natural law is all about. We understand that. We'll become a free people. We don't. More tyranny and enslavement will be forthcoming. And until that dynamic of knowledge changes, we cannot expect things to really radically improve in the human condition. When we do come into that knowledge and then we willfully choose the right behaviors over the wrong ones, we're going to see radical positive changes in humanity happen, and we're going to be able to become capable of things that we barely even dreamed possible.
Amen. Thank you, Mark Passio. Come back. I'm sorry, if I could just sort of ask you one more thing before you go, because I keep thinking like of another guest that could be on with you and have like these really great discussions. And I'm thinking, perhaps John Perkins, the former economic hitman, or something like,
or maybe my friend Jay Parker. He knows a lot about all of this stuff too, especially from a dark occult perspective as well. So we could talk about that definitely.
Okay.
For now, I'd like to just mention to the listening audience, please do check out my main website, which is whatonearthishappening.com, and I always recommend people to go to the podcast section, which is where the bulk of the informational material is unpacked. And please listen to the podcast in order without skipping around, because there is prerequisite material in the earlier podcasts to understand the later ones. So listen in order from number 1 forward without skipping around at your own pace, and that's how you'll get the maximum benefit from the information on that website.
Thank you again, Mark Passio. Please come back soon. We'll work it out on Skype.
Absolutely. Catherine, thank you so much.
Knuckle punch. Thank you all for tuning in. Please check out my YouTube channel, April Waters, Watters. There are links for donations. They would be immensely appreciated. Thank you. Good night.